Alec Baldwin was the actor on set that pulled the trigger?
Alec Baldwin?
Yes, sir.
Please tell me she's still alive.
I'm sure she's fine. She's just not here.
This is like a movie.
Did you say 500 live rounds recovered?
No, I said there was a total of 500 rounds of ammunition. That is a mix of blanks, dummy rounds, and what we are suspecting, live rounds.
Does Alec Baldwin himself face the potential of criminal charges?
All options are on the table at this point.
He's a multi-award winning actor, known for films like The Hunt for Red October and Beetlejuice and the popular TV series 30 Rock, but Alec Baldwin will soon be taking center stage in a New Mexico courtroom as he stands trial for manslaughter. Authorities charged Baldwin after a gun he was holding on the set of the film Rust went off, resulting in an injury to the director and the death of the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. This is a full deep dive into it all, from Alec Baldwin's background to Rust to what evidence and legal arguments we can expect at his upcoming trial. It is all straight ahead. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 66-year-old Alec Baldwin got his start in acting decades ago. Many of you have probably seen his work. He rose to prominence in the 1980s when he starred on an NBC soap opera called The Doctors. And then he really hit it big in Tim Burton's Beetlejuice movie back in 1988. From there, we have The Departed, we have Married to the Mob, The Marrying Man, The Aviator, Pearl Harbor, and the list goes on and on and on. Baldwin also appeared multiple times on Saturday Night Live, appeared in several Broadway shows in the early 2000s. By 2006, he was once again skyrocketing to fame with his role as Jack Donaghy in the NBC show 30 Rock. He's also listed as producer on the later seasons. And just before 30 Rock's 100th episode, Baldwin earned his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he was the subject of a 2019 roast on Comedy Central. Bottom line, he is definitely a well-known celebrity to most people and has had quite the career so far. But then, we go to October 2021. Baldwin and writer-director Joel Souza started work on a Western called Rust at Bonanza Creek Ranch. It's a ghost town outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And during filming on October 21st, Baldwin, who was starring as the film's lead, also a producer on the film, he was supposed to just pull out a prop gun. But instead, when he drew his weapon, it fired a real bullet. And that bullet hit both Joel Souza and cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, wounding Souza and killing Halyna. We're going to get into the details of what we know happened that day in just a moment, but first, we want to tell you a little bit more about Halyna Hutchins. So she was born in 1979 in Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union. She studied at 2 different universities, getting a degree in international journalism. She worked on documentaries in Eastern Europe as an investigative journalist. She met her husband, Matthew, who's American. They had 1 son together. She was living in the United States at the time of her death, but was reportedly very proud of her Ukrainian heritage. When she moved to Los Angeles, she was encouraged to apply to the American Film Institute Conservatory, where she completed a master's program. In 2019, she was named one of the 10 up-and-coming directors of photography who are making their mark, this by the American Society of Cinematographers. Halyna was director of photography or cinematographer on several projects over the last few years, including the PBS series A Town Called Victoria, a short film called Sunday's Child, and the 2020 movie The Mad Hatter. So clearly, Halyna Hutchins had a great deal of experience when she stepped onto the set of Rust. But all of that sadly ended in a horrible, horrible accident. So now let's talk about October 21st, 2021. What happened that day? We know from interviews with the on-set armor Hannah Gutierrez-Reed and Alec Baldwin and various other crew members that a gunfight scene was supposed to be filmed after lunch inside of a small church at the ranch. Baldwin was supposed to pull the gun out of his holster and point it towards the camera, which had several people standing behind it, only a couple feet away. The weapon was a Colt .45 revolver replica, which was not supposed to contain any live rounds. Now, the gun was reportedly checked very briefly by Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, again, the armor on the set. She explained that to police later that day during an interview.
Yeah, clarify a little bit. So prior to lunch, the guns, you had them out? Yeah. And where were they when they were out?
They were inside with all the camera crew and everything. It's, COVID, everything happening right now. They don't really like a lot of people in there.
Okay.
And so usually I'm like hardly allowed in there unless there's actual firing happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you inside this morning?
I walked in there and I handed the gun to Alex a couple of times, and Alex took it, and everyone was there with him.
Alec?
Alec
Okay.
Baldwin, yeah.
Baldwin? Okay, so you handed him the gun this
Yeah.
morning. Does he pass it off to anybody? Were you able to see that?
At one point, Dave had it, the assistant director, but he was just sitting in with it, and then I saw him, and I was like, okay, this is fine. He's just sitting in, and then I walked out, and yeah.
And how do you know that Dave had it?
I handed it off to Dave while he was sitting in for the shot.
Okay. All right, so you guys were the only 3 handlers prior to lunch?
Alec, Dave, me. Dave was after lunch.
Okay.
Dave was after lunch. Yeah, that should have been the only ones. Maybe Sarah, possibly, but yeah. Because that's the thing, they chill on our little table, and we're pretty much there all the time.
Okay.
But what happened is when Baldwin pulled out the gun, it fired a single shot. Now, Baldwin has defended himself publicly, swearing he did not pull the trigger. In fact, he spoke to George Stephanopoulos on ABC News, saying, well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger. And Stephanopoulos asked, so you never pulled the trigger? Baldwin responds, no. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never. Now, the bullet hit Halyna Hutchins, who was standing behind the monitor, and the bullet traveled through her chest and into director Joel Souza's shoulder. The script supervisor called 911. Emergency crews were there just minutes later. Halyna was flown by helicopter to the University of New Mexico Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Souza was taken by ambulance to a medical center in Santa Fe to be treated for his gunshot wound. He was able to offer a lot of information to police before he was sedated for surgery. Let's take a listen.
Kind of tell me what happened.
We're filming at Bonanza Creek Ranch. What was that, 25 or something? We were rehearsing in the church set. Sorry, I'm trying.
It's okay,
take your time. Very loud bang, and it felt like somebody kicked me in the shoulder, and then I was down on my ass, and then I looked over and see the cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, with blood coming out of her back.
Holding a what? I'm sorry?
With blood coming out of her back.
Okay.
She was between me and I think where the gun went off, and I think it went through her and into me.
And usually the guns on set, are they usually, what kind of guns are used? I mean, they're filled...
Western, so it's all the Old West style.
Okay. And usually they're filled with blanks, though?
What they generally do, I believe, is the armorer will keep the gun what they call clean or cold when they hand it over for rehearsal, meaning they show it to the actor, they show it to the first AD, and they all agree that there are no rounds in it. And then when picture's up, they will have different types of blanks, what they'll call a quarter load or a half load. And then the actors are walked through on where you aim, don't aim because blanks are still dangerous. But they're telling me there's a bullet in you.
Is Halyna still alive? Who? Halyna?
We're going to have to find out about her in just a little bit here, okay?
Please tell me she's still alive.
I'm sure she's fine. She's just not here. So we don't know.
This is like a movie.
Now, back at the film set turned crime scene, investigators were trying to determine what happened and when it happened. So as Joel and Halyna were loaded into an ambulance and helicopter, an officer tracked down Alec Baldwin.
How's it going, sir? So my understanding, you were in the room when someone was shot?
Holding the gun, yeah.
Okay, alrighty.
What do you need?
Well, I know your name, so
okay.
it's
call you back, okay?
Let me get with my lieutenant and see where we want you to hang out, okay?
Whatever you want to do. Whatever.
Yes, sir. All right, give me just a second. Hey, LT. So I got the immediate 4 people that were in the room. Alec Baldwin, the actor, is the one who pulled the trigger. Do you want me to have him sit tight or?
Yeah, you're gonna have to sit tight.
Sit tight in the unit?
I have the armor in here. This is all their stuff. I have the gun used is in there.
And I got the 2 people that were in the room.
Okay.
You gonna have Alec Baldwin take a seat in the back of my unit, or?
No, we know where he's at. We know who he is.
Yeah.
We just need to stay. Is he in a trailer?
No, he's right there, in the gray and black.
Okay. All right. So try to keep him away from everybody.
Okay. Have him
talk to anybody.
Okay. I can just have him sit. I can sit with him in my unit.
That's fine.
Okay.
Are you doing okay?
No, I'm not actually.
Okay. Yeah. Crazy series of events. So we're requesting that you and Ms. Gutierrez conduct interviews back at the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. Yeah, if an associate
you tell
or
me what to do.
Okay.
You tell me what to do. Just tell me.
We would appreciate that, and then we'll.
When do you want me to do that?
We're gonna probably go right now.
So can I take my car? That's my car. Go back to the base camp, get rid of the wardrobe, get my clothes and stuff, and then I'll follow you.
Yes. I think. No, that's okay. I think we might. I don't know if this is suspected blood or real blood.
Oh, this is fake.
Fake. Okay.
Yeah. This is all theatrical.
I'm going to talk. Okay. I'm going to talk to our crime scene technician and see what she'd suggest or would like.
In the interest of time, go back to the base camp and give them everything. Put my street clothes on and gather my stuff, and I'll be down at the base camp waiting for you.
Okay.
They know where my trailer is, and I'll just wait for you. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do.
Right. Okay.
So,
yeah.
Let me know. I'll be down at the base camp. I have a trailer there.
Okay.
Let me give them the wardrobe back, put my street clothes on, gather my personal items, and then I'll be down there. You tell me where to follow you. Okay. Go right away.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds good, sir. And we're going to go talk to Ms. Gutierrez right now because we're going to request the same information. I'm going to ask the armory specialist. We're at. She's a little shaken up, so just leave that stuff on, sir. Yeah, leave them on right now. So I'm going to talk to my crime scene tech.
Let me know what you want to do.
Okay.
I'll wait here till you come.
All right, sounds good, sir.
Officers separated Halyna Gutierrez-Reed from the rest of the crew, putting her in the back of a squad car where she was sometimes seen crying. In fact, at one point, an officer escorted her to the bathroom and learned that Gutierrez-Reed was pretty new to the industry.
I just kind of wish that any of my coworkers could stop seeing me because I already feel super bad.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So-
Yeah, I don't want to go back.
Okay.
I just want to get the out of here and never show my face in this industry ever again.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Oh, I would. I'm like the only female armor in the game, and I just up my whole entire career.
Have you studied armory, or did you go to classes, or how did you get into it?
My dad's one of the best armorers in the entire world, and he trained me, and I'm a failure.
By the way, a little background on that. Halyna Gutierrez-Reed's stepfather is Thel Reed, a longtime movie armorer. He spoke with media outlets after the shooting defending his daughter. And then we have the Santa Fe County Sheriff, who announced what happened at a news conference and gave details about all the evidence that they were collecting from the film set.
The first deputy arrived at 2:00 p.m. and EMS arrived at 2:01 p.m. It was later determined that Halyna Hutchins, the director of cinematography, and Joel Souza, the director, had been shot while rehearsing a scene on the movie Rust. During the initial investigation, it was determined that actor-producer Alec Baldwin was the person that fired the weapon. We identified 2 other people that handled and/or inspected the loaded firearm prior to Baldwin firing the weapon. These 2 individuals are armorer Hannah Reed Gutierrez and assistant director David Halls. All 3 individuals have been cooperative in the investigation and have provided statements. Over the last few days, our investigative team has been working diligently to conduct interviews, execute search warrants, and collect and process evidence from the scene. During this process, we determined that there were a limited amount of movie set staff present in the area where the actual incident took place, although there were approximately 100 people on set. Through the execution of search warrants, we have collected about 600 items of evidence. These include, but are not limited to, 3 firearms, approximately 500 rounds of ammunition, and several pieces of clothing and accessories. We believe that we have in our possession the firearm that was fired by Mr. Baldwin.
And back to Alec Baldwin. Once he got changed and he was out of his costume, Baldwin joined detectives in an interrogation room.
I'm at the police station, the sheriff's, and they're about to interview me. How is everyone at home? How are the kids?
The kids are great. The kids are great.
Did you, hold on a second, please. Did you tell Carmen what's going on?
No, I didn't.
Okay. We've done this for 2 weeks, and we did it the right way every day. Every day. You're on a set, you rehearse, they bring you what's called a cold gun. The gun is either completely empty, the chambers, or there is a cosmetic piece. So for example, if you're the camera, and this is going to sound silly and specific, but if I'm pointing a gun close to the camera, you want to see into the cylinder that there's material in there, cosmetic material. So those rounds are cosmetic rounds. They put them in, and you rehearse, or even in a shot when you don't fire. I pull the gun and you see there's some material inside the cylinder. They'd hand me a cold gun, no charges. They always hand you a cold gun with nothing in it to rehearse. And then when you shoot, and if you are shooting loads that are flash loads, and they're usually in 3 denominations, quarter, half, or full load rounds, so that the flash is bright and the sound is loud, louder, loudest. Full load is loudest. So if you're outside, you want a full load, bang, you want a loud sound. If you're inside, you do a quarter load. Right before you shoot, everyone preps, crew puts the earplugs in, some put headphones on, the camera's there, very often there's a loose tight screen, but you're the camera operator and there's the camera, so I should always shoot off camera, you never shoot into the lens. And you shoot, and there's a flash and a sound. Now, I went to lunch, she disarmed me. I sat down.
She being
Hannah, the armaments person. She was always handling the guns, 99% of the time. So I would, if I had a cosmetic rifle with no rounds, I'd hand it to one of her assistants. I'm sitting there. She disarms me. We go to lunch. We come back from lunch, and they hand me the revolver, the Colt.
And I just like the name. It's Hannah again.
They arm me, and you're assuming, as we've done every time, that it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. And I put the gag in the shot, you're the camera, because I have a coat, and I have a holster, and I pull the coat over, and I kind of cup my hands like I folded my hands. And then I'm going to slowly sneak the revolver, the Colt out, and turn and shoot these other guys, or try to shoot them. I take the coat over the thing, the camera's there. I believe, my recollection is she was there, turned a bit, like talking to him. So I think she was hitting the right armpit. But this is all I know, and that is that I take the gun out in the rehearsal. He wants it very dramatic and very slow, kind of sneak up on them. I take the gun out, and as I take, as it clears, as the barrel clears, I turn and cock the gun in rehearsal. I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun. Nothing. No flash charges, nothing. Now, this is a puzzle to me. And this is making me very emotional now, but in my time, and I'm older now, but when I was younger and I was shooting guns in films, I've never seen a theatrical flash round where the material went through someone's armpit, came out their body, and hit somebody else in the shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if your department is prepared to go find out what comes out of his shoulder surgically. Is that a live round?
That's what we are actually looking at.
Is that a lot? Because it doesn't make any sense otherwise.
The detectives spoke with Baldwin for about an hour, and then they delivered the devastating news.
I do have some very unfortunate news to tell you.
What?
She didn't make it. Yeah. So Joel's still at the hospital, but the other person involved didn't make it. Sorry. I just didn't want you to hear it outside of here.
Is there something we could do for you? Is that Jonah in there?
What?
Jonah, the one back there?
Yeah, okay. want Jonah in here with you? What do you want to do? Do you want to make a call? You can sit.
You should go.
In a tweet the day after the shooting, Baldwin said, quote, "There are no words to convey my shock and sadness regarding the tragic accident that took the life of Halyna Hutchins, a wife, a mother, and deeply admired colleague of ours. I'm fully cooperating with the police investigation to address how this tragedy occurred, and I am in touch with her husband, offering my support to him and his family. My heart is broken for her husband, their son, and all who knew and loved Halyna." Talking about a big legal case like this makes me think of the largest personal injury firm in the country, Morgan & Morgan, our proud sponsor here on Sidebar. This is a firm that has secured verdicts and settlements in the millions. This is a firm that doesn't just accept lowball offers, but fights for what you deserve in compensation. This is a firm that makes the whole process as easy as possible for their clients, because from submitting documents to talking to your legal team, it can all be done from your smartphone. And this is a firm that doesn't have an upfront fee. No, you only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar or by dialing #law, that's #529 on your phone. Now, Baldwin wasn't the only high-profile actor starring in Rust. No, Jensen Ackles, probably most famous for portraying Dean Winchester on the CW show Supernatural, and most recently The Boys on Amazon Prime, was supposed to portray a U.S. Marshal in the movie. So he also did an interview with detectives and had nothing but praise for Halyna.
So I was standing just outside the church, right off the porch there, when the gun went off. And again, they were just setting up a shot of him pulling out the gun and showing Halyna. You know, she was very kind of involved in every shot. You know, this is. I'm used to kind of directors being a little bit more of like, okay, I want to see this, I want to see this. But Joel was more of like, this is the scene. Halyna, how are we going to shoot it? And so she was really, for all intents and purposes, she was the meaning of director of photography. She was directing all of the camera shots, and she was very, very passionate and amazing at it. But she would get right in there. She would even like move me, like finding the light and stuff just right. So she was very, very hands-on. Some people don't do that. A lot of people don't do that. They'll just sit in their, you know, chair behind the monitor and just be like, you know, on the radio telling people to do things. But she was very hands-on. So she was standing right there next to Reed and looking at the monitor on the camera, asking Alec to show her what, you know, show me your action. So he was just showing her the action. And then it went off. I don't know if he was just drawing back on the hammer and his thumb slipped and that was enough of a spring to get forward and hit that primer or what, but I'm sure he's told you. And so I heard the shot go off. There shouldn't have been any shot go off because it was a setup. There was no cameras rolling. There wasn't supposed to be around a blank to be shot in that particular camera sequence, and nobody yelled "hot gun." So when it went off, it just sounded different. I mean, a real round sounds different than a blank, and I didn't immediately think that it was. I just was like, "What the was that?" And so I spun into the church. I saw Joel down screaming. I saw Halyna seated, and I could see her back was to me, but I could see the blood pooling on her khaki jacket. And so I just started yelling medic. And then that was about it. Then I stood back. I kicked myself for not running in there and doing something, but I don't know what I would have done.
Filming on Rust did eventually resume, moving from New Mexico to Montana in April of 2023. No release date for the film has been announced. For the next several months after the shooting, there were a ton of lawsuits that were filed back and forth between crew members, the production company, cast members like Baldwin, and of course, Halyna's family. The Hutchins suit ended with a settlement, the details of which were not disclosed. But what we do know is that Matthew Hutchins, again Halyna's husband, is now a producer on the Rust Project. That was part of the deal. Then we go to January 2023. Baldwin put out a video in which he talked about rumors that he wasn't cooperating with Santa Fe investigators.
One other quick note, any suggestion that I am not complying with requests or orders or demands or search warrants about my phone, that's a lie. This is a process where one state makes the request of another state. Someone from another state can't come to you and say, give me your phone, give me this, give me that. They can't do that. They've got to go through the state you live in. That is a process that takes time. They have to specify what exactly they want. You can't just go through your phone and take, your photos or your love letters to your wife or what have you. I really don't know, but of course, we are 1,000% going to comply with all that. We're, perfectly fine with that.
And then, just days later, prosecutors announced that Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed would each be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which they were charged with. The two were also hit with a gun enhancement charge that carries a 5-year prison term, but that enhancement charge was later dropped. This came after Baldwin's legal team argued that he was charged under the firearm enhancement statute that did not exist at the time of the shooting. The first assistant director and safety coordinator, Dave Halls, had already accepted a plea in this case in connection with the onset shooting. Remember, he's the one who apparently took the gun from Gutierrez-Reed and handed it to Baldwin. Now, there has been some dispute on who actually handed the weapon to Baldwin. In the end, he was charged with negligent use of a deadly weapon. During a virtual plea hearing, Halls pleaded no contest to the misdemeanor charge. In addition to 6 months unsupervised probation, he had to pay a $500 fine, perform 24 hours of community service, take a fire safety course, testify in all hearings involving the shooting, and have no contact with co-defendants or witnesses. Then we fast forward to April 2023. After the first special prosecutor and the DA both stepped aside from this case and new special prosecutors were brought in, charges against Alec Baldwin were dropped. But it was announced at the time that the investigation was active and ongoing. And that investigation led to a grand jury proceeding, and in January of 2024, the jury indicted Alec Baldwin once again for involuntary manslaughter. He entered a not guilty plea and he waived his arraignment. As for Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, she went to trial the next month where she was convicted. She was sentenced to the maximum of 18 months in prison, and that is where we now go into Alec Baldwin's trial. Now, there was a lot from the trial of Halyna Gutierrez-Reed that could very well be relevant in the upcoming trial of Alec Baldwin that you may see again. Evidence that is both helpful to the prosecution's case and other evidence that is helpful to the defense's case. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Some evidence and arguments that may make their way into this trial. For example, if we're going to preview what an opening statement could look like from the prosecution in Alec Baldwin's trial, a preview of what this case is about, a preview of what to expect, I want you to listen to Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey, what she had to say about Alec Baldwin in her closing arguments in the trial of Halyna Gutierrez-Reed.
The defense. Alec Baldwin is to blame for acting like a prima donna on the movie set and bossing people around. This is Hollywood, for heaven's sakes. I would imagine that's relatively common. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that his conduct was right. I am the person who indicted him. Alec Baldwin's conduct and his lack of gun safety inside that church on that day is something that he's going to have to answer for. Not with you and not today. That'll be with another jury on another day. Did Mr. Baldwin also contribute when he pointed the gun at people and pulled the hammer back and regardless of what he said to George Stephanopoulos, pulled the trigger? Yes, he is. And again, we'll deal with that another time.
So that sets up perfectly what we can expect in a prosecution's opening statement in July. When we say involuntary manslaughter, we're talking about recklessness or criminal negligence. My understanding, there are 2 theories by which the jury could find Alec Baldwin guilty. A, he negligently handled a firearm, or B, he acted without due caution and circumspection in that he committed an act with total disregard or indifference for the safety of others. Now remember the accusation here, right? The accusation is that he pulled the trigger during a rehearsal when it wasn't necessary for him to have a real weapon, let alone to pull the trigger, and especially when the armorer wasn't around. Yeah, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed wasn't in that church. The argument would be that as a seasoned actor, and moreover as a producer on the film, he should have known better. He, as the producer, was in control of this set. He created an unsafe working environment. He rushed the crew. He was a rogue actor. No pun intended, but he basically did things that he shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. So one of the key pieces of evidence that we can expect to see at Alec Baldwin's trial is the claim he didn't pull the trigger. And I imagine prosecutors will play the infamous interview that Baldwin did with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos, where he said, "I didn't pull the trigger. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger at them." But then I would imagine the prosecution will once again call Bryce Ziegler, FBI firearms examiner, listen to what he said in Gutierrez-Reed's case.
Did you form an opinion about whether the handler would have to pull the trigger of the gun to make the gun fire?
My opinion is that the only reason this occurred is because of the breakage. So in order to move the trigger away from the hammer, that's typically accomplished by pulling the trigger. So in this case, the only way that was possible is because the trigger actually fractured.
Okay. So in order for you, just so that we're clear, in order for you to make the gun fire without pulling the trigger, when it was in the full cock position, you had to break it.
That's what I had to do in my lab. I can't account for all the other possibilities that may have existed in some hypothetical scenario, but this is the result as I tested it in my laboratory. It would not fire without pulling the trigger in the full cock setting without being broken.
Okay, essentially what we're hearing is the only way the gun could go off without pulling the trigger is if you basically break the gun. And that will be very strong evidence to show Alec Baldwin must have pulled the trigger. Now, Alec Baldwin could argue he didn't realize his finger was on the trigger, that he wasn't lying when he told George Stephanopoulos that. But where I think the defense will really put their focus is on the fact that this gun was destroyed by the FBI during testing. So how can we really know if it was a mechanical issue that caused the gun to discharge or not? In fact, his team tried to get the case dismissed on those grounds. And I wouldn't also be surprised if they call their own experts or expert to suggest that the gun could in fact go off without pulling the trigger. So it might be a bit of a battle of the experts. But now let's talk about video evidence that will probably make its way into Baldwin's trial. Now again, the idea here is that Baldwin went off script, right? He did his own thing, which again is problematic for his case. While the defense might say that it's not Baldwin's job to check the gun, it's not his job to load it, it's not his job to know if it's loaded, and certainly, as the jury in Gutierrez-Reed's case determined, it was ultimately her job to keep a safe set, no matter what. But what I imagine the prosecution will say in Baldwin's trial is he too is to blame. He was unpredictable, he was reckless, he was dangerous. Yeah, Gutierrez-Reed should have stopped it, but he too is to blame. And as the producer, who, as you're about to see, was seemingly directing people what to do on set, the prosecution will argue he has a responsibility there. For example, I want you to see something. This was the rehearsal inside of the church before the gun went off. And I want you to listen to what Russ crew member Ross Adiego had to say about this very specific move that Baldwin does on camera.
Okay, ready? Okay, ready? Ready.
And set. Ready, and action.
Harlan Russ.
The blocking that you were describing, as a person who was working in the room, were you expecting Mr. Baldwin to pull the gun all the way out? Like what we just saw in those clips?
In the blocking of the ECU.
What's the ECU?
Extreme close-up.
Okay.
I was not.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
My understanding was it was just to kind of reveal that weapon coming out of the holster to the camera.
But this idea of Alec Baldwin going off script, this was amplified a lot more when we heard from Brian Carpenter, a firearm safety expert. So a clip was played of Baldwin allegedly firing a blank gun during a take for the movie. Watch what happened.
If I'm going to shoot right, do you want to go on the other side of the camera? I don't want to shoot toward you. Okay, right here. Okay, I want to shoot close to you. Here we go. Set. Here we go. Ready. And action. Go!
So, can you give us an idea? Is it important when you're on a movie set and you hear the word cut, is it important that the actors not continue to fire the guns?
Yes. And when you say cut, everything stops, and it's not just from a creative standpoint, it's also from a safety standpoint. Keep in mind, you're dealing with stunts, special effects, explosives, et cetera, et cetera. So when the word cut is said, everything should cease immediately.
So in this instance where Mr. Baldwin was firing the gun after the word cut, is there anything that you would have done?
I would file that under the category of going, as the old saying goes, off script. He went off script there and fired for whatever reason that I guess he felt he needed to, but I would have probably said something to him about that as well.
The idea is that Alec Baldwin seemingly fired after cut, that this was reckless. That's the argument that prosecutors would use. But there's more.
Everyone doesn't need to be right here, like in the path of the gun. Could you please move?
Did you hear that?
I did.
Tell us what's going on there.
It sounded like Miss Gutierrez attempting to correct the fact that she knew that Mr. Baldwin was pointing that weapon in an unsafe manner, and she was attempting to move the crew out of the path of where he was pointing it, knowing that it was loaded with blanks.
When you drop your arm, that means he's 10 feet away. I can't see how close he is, but I want to be almost up by the time he gets here.
No, I'm going to go into this.
Yeah.
Well, let me show you something. Hold on. Step back to your original mark. So 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, I'm getting up.
Right.
Then when he drops his arm, Halyna get out. He drops his arm. That means Brady's close. I'm going to start to really get up.
Okay.
Do you see anything concerning here?
He's doing what we saw previously in one of the other videos with the stunt performer. He's using the weapon as a pointing stick, as if it's his finger.
And I imagine the prosecution will also say that whether the gun was loaded with live rounds or not, Baldwin shouldn't have been doing any of this. Because listen to what Carpenter says when questioned by Gutierrez-Reed's lawyer, who seemed, again, to want to cast all the blame on Alec Baldwin. Listen to his response.
In the review of this case, you're not certain when those live rounds appeared on set. What day, is that right?
No.
Okay. Or how they got on set?
No.
Okay. But in any event, Mr. Baldwin at that moment should have still treated that weapon as if it was loaded, going back to the other rules.
Correct.
Now, Carpenter would go on to state it's the responsibility of the armorer to step in here to correct this behavior, but Baldwin shouldn't be doing this. There was an argument put forward by the defense, and I wonder if it's going to be co-opted by the prosecution in a way during Baldwin's trial, that it was very hard for anyone to tell Baldwin no, to tell him what to do. That it would be hard for the armorer to tell him to stop, because listen to this exchange.
One more. I forgot the recoil stuff. No, right away. Let's reload. Here we go.
So, Halyna. Hi.
Here we go. Come on.
Well, I had to go closer because Danny did, so. You want...
We should have had two guns and both were reloading.
How many movie sets do you think you've worked on in your career?
Hundreds.
That conduct that we're seeing on the part of Mr. Baldwin, is that typical conduct from an actor on a movie set?
No.
Why not?
Well, number one, he's basically instructing the armor how to do their job at that point, telling them that we should have had the gun a second reload, hurry up, give it to me, fast, fast, fast. This is that moment. This is that moment I spoke about earlier. This is that moment that you need to stop and say, no, I'm not going to hurry up, I'm going to slow down. And we don't need to be, passing off weapons this fast or loading guns this fast. This is creating an unsafe and nerve-wracking situation, to describe it in more layman's terms. Always on any kind of live training exercise, military training or whatnot, you don't want to put people in a nervous position. That creates, now you can stress, it's a level of stress that's necessary in realism training.
And of course, what places Alec Baldwin in a different legal position than just a regular actor was his title and position of authority.
When filming in New Mexico, did it appear to you that Alec Baldwin was the boss?
Yes.
Did you ever see anybody tell Alec Baldwin no?
No.
And in terms of the structure, did it appear that other producers were below him?
Yes.
This is the way to think about this. Producer, control over the set. That's what I imagine the prosecution will argue to this jury. Now let's move on to a different aspect of the prosecution's case. Training. So prosecutors will try to show that Alec Baldwin, or they will seemingly try to show that Alec Baldwin had an obligation to attend weapons safety trainings. But, well, listen to what Halyna Gutierrez-Reed said about this in her interview with police.
So what do you teach actors or crew members when it comes to gun safety?
So it really also depends on the actors too. Like big ones like Nick Cage, if they tell me, if they tell the director, that they don't really care to do it, I can try to teach them for the most part, but a lot of the times they might not even listen to me or really pay attention or be on their phone. Alec was on his phone a lot of that entire thing. The actors were distracted even too. And I tried my best to work with all three of them.
Wasn't paying attention during safety class. Adds into that theory of recklessness or negligence. Little side note here, by the way. So prosecutors had been trying to force Gutierrez-Reed to testify at Alec Baldwin's trial. The idea is that they would grant her immunity. We actually did a whole sidebar on this about how prosecutors could legally compel her to testify even though she was convicted and is going to fight her case on appeal. But recently, the judge in this case decided not to allow this to happen. So she will not be required to testify. So what that means is that seemingly the only time this jury in the Alec Baldwin trial will hear Halyna Gutierrez-Reed speak is from videos like her interview with police. Now, another thing I would think prosecutors will try to introduce, and this is particularly true should Alec Baldwin testify, is to strike at his credibility. For instance, here is Detective Alexandria Hancock, and I want you to listen to what she said happened when she spoke to Alec Baldwin.
Now, as part of your investigation, you concluded not only that Hannah was not in the church at the time, but that she had handed the weapon to Mr. Halls?
Yes.
And did you also conclude that Mr. Halls had handed that to Mr. Baldwin?
Yes. However, there were opposing statements at the beginning of the investigation.
Okay, there were conflicting statements at the beginning?
Yes.
So yeah, credibility issue here, can make that argument. Other hand, you could say, look, this is a traumatic event. It's not surprising in these kinds of events for people to get confused, to mix up details. So maybe it's not the most important aspect of the case. And by the way, Dave Halls, who I mentioned before, was the assistant director who pleaded no contest to negligently using a deadly weapon for how he handled the weapon that day. Now, before I get into what came out of Gutierrez-Reed's trial that may be helpful to Baldwin's defense, I'm going to talk about that. I want to highlight something else for a second, something else that came out before this trial. It concerned a prosecutor's filing. So the prosecutors filed what's called a notice of intent to introduce evidence of crimes, wrongs, or other acts. Generally speaking, you aren't allowed to present that kind of evidence to a jury because it's unfairly prejudicial. It's not relevant. You can't say, well, we're going to show you evidence of this person's character, so he must have acted that way in this particular incident. You can't say somebody has a propensity to do this kind of thing. There is an exception. You can say that this evidence is actually intrinsic or directly connected to the crime itself. You can say you are presenting this evidence to prove something else, like motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, absence of mistake, lack of an accident. The prosecutors write in this filing, quote, "In this case, evidence of defendant's conduct between October 12th through the 21st, 2021, so again, before the actual shooting, outlined in the introductory section, as it relates to the firearm at issue in this matter and his handling thereof, is relevant because it is part of the crime of involuntary manslaughter as it shows defendant's recklessness or criminal negligence on October 21st, 2021, when he shot and killed Halyna Hutchins. Defendant's acts are intrinsic as they conform to a reckless mens rea present on October 21st, 2021. That's the mental state. And this is, of course, when the defendant, they say, shot Halyna Hutchins. So what do prosecutors want to show at trial? They say, quote, 1, Alec Baldwin used his gun as a pointer directing crew members. 2, discharged the revolver after the filming was over and cut was called in violation of rules governing the safe handling of firearms on set. 3, the defendant shot several scenes wherein he placed his finger on the trigger of the revolver where the scene did not require any shooting of the firearm. 4, rushed the armorer to reload and crew members to work at a faster pace. 5, was inattentive during the firearms training conducted by Miss Gutierrez and was distracted by texting, FaceTiming family members and making videos for his family's enjoyment. 6, engaged in horseplay with the revolver while making videos during his firearms training while using pole load blanks. 7, displayed erratic and aggressive behavior during the filming of Rust that created potential safety concerns. 8, displayed reckless behavior as it related to the use of a firearm, such as pointing it and firing a blank round at a crew member while using that crew member as a line of sight as his perceived target. And 9, after October 21st, 2021, so after the shooting, was insistent that he not be required to follow safety recommendations made by film set safety experts on the continuation of the filming of Rust in Montana. So, if prosecutors are able to actually introduce evidence like this could be potentially quite problematic to Baldwin's defense. And now let's talk about the defense. So as I mentioned, the defense will probably spend a lot of time on the gun, how the actual weapon in this case was destroyed by the FBI, that we can't know for sure if it was in a condition that it could be misfired or if it could malfunction. Also the idea that he is not to blame, right? They'll say he's an actor. He's not the armorer. It's not his job to know if a gun is loaded or not. He assumes it's safe because Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer, had handled it. And that applies the same way to a producer. Yeah, he was a producer, but he was a producer more in name than in practice. And even so, does that make him responsible for firearms on set? It seems Baldwin will put the focus and blame on Halyna Gutierrez-Reed. I mean, she was just convicted. I mean, some of the worst evidence for her, and maybe the best evidence for Baldwin, was in her police interviews.
I went back through a bag that I had. This bag had like a bunch of loose dummies in it. And I went through and I checked all of them and I put them into 2 boxes. And so we had 2 boxes of 45 long Colt dummies that were mine from the last show. And they were in my car for like 2 weeks. I jumped right off of the old way into this. I was barely home for like a week. So, yeah.
But he told you to check your supply.
Yeah.
And what you had to take it.
Yeah.
So he authorized you to bring.
He authorized me to bring, dummies. Okay.
To be clear, she admitted that she took ammunition from another production, rounds she left in her car for 2 weeks, and put them in boxes for the Rust set. Prosecutors said that is not proper safety protocol here. But there's more.
So that's what I'm saying. So this one is exactly what it looked like was in there.
Okay. And that one doesn't have any holes.
So that's honestly, that box of dummies might have some wonky ones in it. And we got that, I think, a week ago.
Have you ever in your history of working, encountered live rounds on the set?
Never.
Okay. And how do you know that?
Because every dummy I've ever shaken has been a dummy, and the other ones have holes in the side, and I've never experienced a round that looked like a dummy and behaved like a blank or anything. So, yeah, I am shaking all of them most of the time.
Most of the time? Most of the time? Look, the argument that worked for the prosecution to convict Halyna Gutierrez-Reed was that she wasn't diligent. And as much as she said she was rushed and she was working 2 jobs and she couldn't do the proper safety checks, the jury didn't buy it. The idea was it was her job to slow things down. It was her job to make sure no live rounds were in the gun. It was her job to make sure a shooting on set does not happen. And remember, the prosecution suggested that the live ammo came from her and not the weapons and ammo supplier Seth Kenny from PDQ Props. Once again, this is lead investigator Alexandria Hancock.
The live ammunition that you seized from PDQ Props, what did you do with it?
We submitted all the live ammunition for testing with the FBI.
And did you receive information that the live ammunition from PDQ didn't match the live ammunition on the set of Rust?
That's correct. It didn't match at all.
And going back to the shooting, I can imagine Baldwin's defense team will say this was the armorer's fault because the gun was in her possession and it was her job to check it, along with Dave Hall's, before this weapon was handed off to, yes, our client, Alec Baldwin. Again, just an actor.
Did Ms. Gutierrez walk away from the cart with Mr. Baldwin's gun?
Yes.
And who put the dummies in Mr. Baldwin's gun?
Hannah.
You indicated that you only saw 3 or 4. You didn't see 6.
I don't recall her fully rotating the cylinder.
Okay. You don't recall her fully rotating it?
I do not.
Okay. And even though the cylinder wasn't fully rotated, did you let that safety check sort of pass?
I did.
Okay. Were you criminally charged in this case?
I was.
And did you enter a no contest plea to negligent use of a firearm?
I did. I was negligent in checking the gun properly.
In your experience, should the armorer ever leave a gun with anyone else and leave the area?
Not a live weapon, no. And when I say live, I mean a weapon capable of firing a round or a blank.
I also think that there could be an avenue for Alec Baldwin's defense team to argue or to suggest, okay, you want to say he didn't attend safety trainings? Well, guess what? If it was conducted by Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, what good would that have been? I wasn't the only one breaking the rules. It seems like no one knew what to do, including Halyna Gutierrez-Reed herself. So don't blame me for not paying attention or going to trainings. I think that's a fair argument.
Do you see anything concerning in this video?
And the number one thing is muzzle discipline. That performer, that stunt performer, I'm assuming that's a stunt performer right there, has got what appears to be live weapons, and he's got zero muzzle discipline. He's holding the shotgun, and if you back it up to the beginning, he points it almost directly at, I believe it's Joel Souza. Well, from what I can see on the from the camera angles is, I don't know if she's present here, and it appears that they have live weapons out without her presence. If she were present, I would ask that she. Well, I would think that she would tell that performer that you need to put that weapon pointed down at the ground if she's standing there with him.
Did you see anything noteworthy in that clip?
Muzzle discipline, but more importantly, there was a weapon exchange that occurred with. I didn't see a safety check between those weapons.
And did you just see Ms. Gutierrez come into the frame?
I did. Okay, she's carrying the double barrel shotgun. It looks like. Muzzle end up.
Is that a proper way to carry that gun?
It is not.
Is that a safe way to carry that gun?
It is not.
So with all that said, this was just a mere preview of what we may see at the upcoming trial of Alec Baldwin beginning on July 9th. And we plan to follow this trial for you every step of the way. We will be putting out episodes doing breakdowns of the testimony and the day's events, so hopefully you can check that all out. And remember, Despite the evidence, Alec Baldwin is innocent. He has to be proven guilty. And in a case that in many ways is unprecedented, we will see how this all shakes out. But at the end of the day, we can't forget that this isn't about Halyna Gutierrez-Reed. This isn't about Alec Baldwin. This is about Halyna Hutchins, who tragically lost her life in an accident that should never have happened. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.